All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Clay Purvis. I'm the Director for Telecommunications and Connectivity with the state of Vermont. We're here today to have a hearing on the public comments draft of the 10-year telecommunications plan. We are required to produce a plan every 3 years. This plan will be the latest addition to the telecommunications plan. It is required to cover all things telecommunications in the state of Vermont. In early May, we released the public comments version. This is the first draft of the telecommunications plan. We are collecting public comments, and we'll be doing so on this draft until June 5th, middle of next week. So invite you to send your comments in writing as well before June 5th. And this draft, as we produce the final draft, will take into consideration those comments and incorporate changes based on those comments, or explain why we are not accepting those comments. This is the second of 3 hearings we're holding on the public comments draft. The last hearing will be June 1st at 6 o'clock. And that information is also on our website. To begin the evening, we'll hear from our consultants at Rural Innovations Strategies Incorporated, or RISI. They are the responsible party for producing the plan. I have with us Matt Dunn and Alex Kelly from RISI. They're going to go over a short presentation about the plan, and at which point we'll open it up to public comments. We'll ask that when we go to public comment, that we start off with 5-minute comments from each person who wants to speak. And you have additional comments after that, we can come back to you. We have announced this meeting for about an hour. So if we can try to keep it in an hour, we'd invite you back to the hearing next Tuesday, June 1st, if you want to give additional comments, or you can also submit your comments to us in writing. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Dunn.
Great, thank you, Clay, and delighted to be here, and thank you all for joining us on a beautiful May evening in Vermont. It is my pleasure to present a PowerPoint presentation of a summary of the draft 10-year telecommunication plan. To be clear, we are assuming that folks are coming to this having availed themselves of the draft being online and having reviewed it. This is not meant to replace that. I'm going to be moving quickly just to hit the highlights and then leave plenty of time for comment. And with that, we are going to go through this table of contents, talking about the opportunity, a little more about broadband part of the telecommunications plan, then on mobile, and then touch on the issues of public safety and PEG television, which were emphasized in the request for a 10-year telecommunication plan, and for which we received a lot of input. So the big headline that we want to just share is that there is an opportunity now, the likes of which we have not seen before, where we have an understanding of the challenge in connectivity, and there is actually a source of funding to help address it. We believe there is 47,000 premises that lack 25.3 megabits per second service, and there is an ability to have each of these premises reach the 100 over 100 goal of the state of Vermont, really leapfrogging from very poor technology to future-proof technology, and that there's a cost for doing that, which is between $360 million and $440 million. And
draft.
I think there's some feedback. That's anyway. And so we are, and we also know that the ARPA stimulus money provides a significant dent in that need, and that there is other funding that is likely to come from the federal government to continue the march towards moving this group that has been the least connected to being in a future-proof state. But we want to make clear that speed is of the essence. We are not the only state that's addressing these issues and receiving money to do so. So it is really important that the state move quickly to be able to engage these dollars. We are starting with this, even though this is a 10-year telecommunication plan, and we'll get into the 10-year part of it, but we just simply couldn't do it justice without highlighting this moment at this time. So first want to dive into broadband itself and the principles that we brought to doing this 10-year plan. The first was to invest efficiently, which is and that means to focus first on those premises that are not served by wireline 25/3. Megabits per second, which is usually conferred over cable. We also wanted to focus on long-term resilient solutions, making sure that the infrastructure that the state does invest in actually will meet the 100 over 100 goal and continue that march towards getting there. And again, focusing on those places that clearly the marketplace does not naturally invite investment to be able to get to that level, and make sure that they are in the best position for the long term, and to embody Vermont values. And what we mean by that is making sure that the approach prioritizes community input and long-term consumer interest over the next decade or five. So it also talks about the deployment challenges that are out there in this moment. One is that the RDOF subsidy that came from the reverse auction from the FCC has actually complicated CUD planning, and CUDs being the mechanism by which the state had looked to do this kind of broadband deployment. And the RDOF, for a variety of reasons having to do with how the reverse auction worked, meant that many of the CUDs had to go back, not quite to the drawing board, but really rethink their business plans, who their partners could be, and the like. The second is that the stimulus money is creating intense labor and market and material demands, which makes planning complicated and possibly expensive. And CUDs have a whole range of levels of experience and sophistication, from running an ISP and quite effectively and building out, to ones who have just formed as an entity. And so it's going to be important to make sure there is support for those enterprises to be able to be successful in the goals that are set out for them by the state, and to make sure we're meeting them where they are. So the draft plan, recommends a framework that really looks to the recent legislation that passed in the House. We felt that it didn't make sense to do otherwise. Again, funding should be prioritized for CUDs where CUDs exist. That funding should obligate those CUDs to pass every on-grid premise. That's the privilege and the responsibility come together on that front, and that there is, we recommend a multi-phase approach to pursuing that funding to make sure that there is accountability and support for the use of those dollars. We do believe that there are a certain number of requirements for that funding, including that it's for infrastructure that meets the 100 over 100 goal, and that it reaches all on-grid, un- and underserved premises, and that it's meeting safety and resilience standards, along with building networks that can support future public good services like mobile broadband and expansion and public safety. And then, so those are the ones that we feel should be, required of the use of the funding. And then it should also prioritize some things, but not make requirements of using public-private partnerships, adhering to, the kinds of values for consumers, like not having data caps, transparent pricing, affordable options for low-income Vermonters, and leveraging asset ownership for the long term as a funding source for digital adoption. The draft plan recommends network standards for subsidized deployments that are focused on technical standards that I think everyone would want to see in that kind of subsidized deployment. We mentioned before, scalability to symmetrical gigabit and beyond speeds as the market evolves. As we've mentioned before in other conversations, that the speed of broadband need, or the need for broadband speed, is only going to accelerate over time, and we definitely don't want to be making investments and then of this magnitude and then be back here in 5 years saying we now have another divide. We are looking for public safety and VoIP capacity and redundancy. We want to make sure that we have extra capacity to accommodate growth in customers and expansion of self-service, and avoid remote host isolation. We don't recommend predicating funding on elements like open access, net neutrality. Not that we don't think those are good things, but we want to be clear that it will come with some risk of litigation and federal preemption, and we believe that CUDs can go ahead and look to negotiate that on their own, reflecting the communities that they're representing, and that maintains that local control and local flavor to this process. So we do feel strongly that there is that it's important to have support for the CUDs for making these decisions. These are complex decisions that are going to be for partnerships over multiple decades. And the folks that the CUDs are likely to negotiate with, if they're doing public-private partnerships, are going to be incredibly sophisticated and well lawyered, and we want to make sure that there is that we're equipping them for success and to deliver the kind of results that we would all want in the long term. And so we get into some of the details of that, those support mechanisms that would be necessary. And then we also, encourage the adoption of broadband as a core programming element for CUDs after the deployment. Right. This is right now, CUDs are going to be focused on trying to make sure that they've got the infrastructure in place to all Vermonters. But as we've already seen with some of the more advanced CUDs, is that they are well positioned to be able to address the other big issues of affordability, access to devices, and ensuring that people have the digital skills to leverage broadband capacity. So moving on to mobile, which is obviously a core part of a telecommunication union district. The draft plan does include an actual mobile broadband propagation analysis. and it was a sobering process. There's some excellent data that's already available that the state has collected, which is better than just about any other state that we or CTC has been involved with, from driving data and that kind of thing. But the propagation analysis, I think, also reflects what many Vermonters realize, which is that only 37% of addresses are covered indoors. The addresses covered outdoors is much higher at 60%, but there are a number of addresses that are just simply not covered for wireless service that would be reliable and needs to continue to be a focus. I will mention, as the note here shows, that the propagation analysis used the data that we have on towers that are based in Vermont. So it doesn't include some that are along particularly the Connecticut River that might be in a different state, but it gives us a pretty good sense of where we are and where we need to go if we're going to have that kind of coverage. This is analysis of the types of roads covered. So for the most part, Class 1 roads have fairly solid mobile coverage, and those have been targets of recent expansions that have taken place through FirstNet and other deployments, but it drops off significantly when you get to Class 2 and Class 3 roads, and we also have a breakout for highways. So this is, again, another look at the need if we're going to get to something resembling universal mobile voice coverage. I will point out that in many cases, having broadband in a home can allow for mobile connectivity inside a home. So some of those outdoor-indoor differentiations may be obviated by getting high-quality terrestrial broadband into more homes, but there is still work to be done, especially on the for outside uses when those pertain to safety issues. We have a proposal for how best to use dollars that may become available to expand mobile and the type of RFP that could be used to invite carriers to participate in building out the mobile capacity, even beyond what FirstNet is going to be able to do. We present this since there was a possibility of that kind of funding being available, and we want to make sure that there is an awareness of what could be done if this were prioritized. Obviously, public safety is a real focus in our state around telecommunications. We spent a fair bit of time with folks in the public safety community, talking about a variety of different tools that are out there now that could be improved. But at the end of the day, our conclusion is that broadband expansion needs to adhere to the best practices for resiliency and security, because the broadband and then the mobile broadband is going to become the critical backbone for emergency response and public access as it becomes more available. We can't move away from land mobile radio until we get to that point. But the other thing we do want to point out is that in our analysis, the public safety telecommunications system in Vermont are in actually pretty good shape for the public safety enterprises. That's not to say individuals who are needing to call for public safety in a roadside situation where there's no coverage. We also zeroed in on PEG TV, and as we all know, cable access plays an incredible role in the state of Vermont and was particularly powerful during the pandemic. There is a clear desire to be able to get more funding predictability, especially as people are cable cutting and the traditional funding sources for PEG are starting to wane. The Berkshire report is a interesting analysis of possible options. But it does come with some legal risk, and many of the recommendations have legal risk and should be explored under an extensive legal tax analysis, and possibly waiting to see how other states that are first movers in this area do with trying some of the options that are recommended. It was not within the scope of our work to be able to do that kind of legal assessment of the Berkshire report, but we think in the short term, PEG access is important enough that the general fund should support it and make sure that it continues to be an excellent service for all Vermonters. So that's the high points. Again, very much a high-level overview and summary of the report that we submitted, that we hope people have had a chance to take a look at. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Clay to facilitate public comments.
Great, thank you, Matt, for that introduction. We'll start with public comments, starting with those online. So if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. I see Christine Halquist is here, and she has her hand up first. So start off with 5-minute comments for each participant, and then with time remaining, if you'd like to make a second comment, we'll give you a second opportunity. All right, Christine, please take it away. I actually don't think we can hear you. I can't unmute you. Try unmuting yourself. No. Let's move then to Jonathan Baker, and we'll come back to Christine. Jonathan, you're also on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Clay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Fantastic. Okay. I had a little bit of a pointed question here. So I saw in section 5.3, so section 5 is the technology recommendations for fiber. 5.3 mentioned something about upgrading cable infrastructure to be a little closer to fiber speeds. Is that a recommendation that we sort of fund cable providers like Spectrum and Consolidated to upgrade their networks, or what is the thrust of that section?
That's a good question. I think I should have said at the outset that we prefer not to answer questions here at the hearing, but to hear from participants and then take those questions.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's completely my fault for not explaining that better at the beginning. So if you wanted to make that in the form of a comment, I do not believe, and just to take a stab at the question, I do not believe that we are outright recommending that we upgrade cable, but it is something that is coming. The cable has historically upgraded itself, so there's an expectation that will happen. But if you wanted to, have us think about that, we can.
Well, I mean, I was just
that section and make it more clear.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with them doing it on their dime, obviously, but it seems like so the plan is predicated on this statute 202D, which references 202C. It's kind of confusing, but in 202C, there's this requirement to have, competitive choice, open access, all that kind of stuff in there. And I mean, there's a couple of things in here, but this particular is 5.3. I don't think an upgraded Comcast network would be anywhere near close to fulfilling any of those particular requirements from the 202C statute. That would be my comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's if you don't have any more comments, Jonathan, I'll try to go to Christine now.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Christine is writing comments in the.
Oh, let me look at the chat. Okay. Is there any way to get you to talk, Christine? I'm trying to look at options here. I cannot unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. Yep, you're now unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, there was a setting. I'm running Linux, so it's a little finicky when I travel. Okay, so my questions are as follows. Anyway, first of all, I've read the first 100 pages, and I think you've done an excellent job. I'm very impressed. When I've looked at a lot of propagation studies in the state, and I agree, RF is not a very, it's just not practical with the amount of forest we have and the amount of mountains we have. But my questions kind of go as follows. I have, first of all, we've done an analysis. We've got our high-level analysis with NEK broadband, and it comes in at about 132 million, with about 26% of the underserved and unserved locations in the state. If you extrapolate that out to the state, that'd be about 520 million, or even 532 million, but 28 or 32. But if you look at Memorial FiberNet, they're 25 million for 9.7% of the underserved. So I guess my point on that is that it looks like your estimates around what it would cost to connect fiber to everybody in the state is pretty accurate. I guess I don't know where this $1 billion comes from. Maybe you can explain that. And then my second point is that we found that in some of the areas where we ground truth some of the broadband status information, there have been some big errors, particularly in Comcast. Up in Groton, we found that there's about 25% of the locations that are identified as served are not served. So, and I think you're probably aware of some of the difficulties with the broadband status information. A question ties around, AT&T FirstNet. How ubiquitous will that coverage be? It wasn't clear to me in the report. And then finally, if you look at Consolidated, whereas Consolidated is providing service, they're actually overbuilding cable, so it really doesn't necessarily help with our served and underserved locations with their 200,000 locations they're targeting. So those are my thoughts and comments, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And Matt and Alex, that's something we can address as far as FirstNet goes.
Christine,
okay.
and the 1 billion. I just want to make sure which reference you're is there.
Well, I saw a reference in there for $1 billion, and I know it's been quoted in other places, $1 billion to build out, and I just don't. And what are your thoughts on that? Is that just a number you're familiar with that's been quoted? I've seen it quoted. The legislature, the governor quoted at one point, and it was a reference in the telecom plan. I don't remember where.
Are you talking about the cost of building?
To the entire state, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes, to the entire 100% ubiquitous fiber. That I can answer that. Again, we're not answering questions, but do it anyway. That comes from the Magellan study that we commissioned 2 years ago on the feasibility of electric utilities. And we had two numbers that came out of that: a $300 million number that was to get the unserved and underserved, and then $1 billion to do the entire state. And I would recommend you revisit that document to understand where that number comes from. But that's the number that everyone's referencing.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. As far as the consolidated, the consolidated coverage seems to, and it seemed to be addressed in your plan, and I want to make sure I get that right, that they'll address 200,000 households, but they seem to be only overbuilding cable. Did I get that right as well?
That's more or less correct.
Yep,
and
their
go ahead, Matt. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. That's what we heard from the folks at Consolidated, was that their primary focus was on overbuilding cable.
Okay.
Their costs are different because they're overlashing their existing network. So the Magellan study was a study on utilities doing the work, but they're an incumbent telephone provider, so their cost is different.
So are we able to extrapolate that from then that because the CUDs are able to do it, we can do it for significantly less cost than the utilities?
No.
Okay, because again, if I look at the numbers, we finished our high level design. We show 132 million to address 26% of the underserved locations, and which extrapolates out to about 128 million to the state. Memorial Fiber Net has $25 million capital plan, which they cover 9.7% of the underserved, and that extrapolates to 250 million or so. So it just seems like we've never, those $1 billion numbers seem pretty far. They seem high. Yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Matt? From your group, what your group looked at?
We'll work hard to make sure that we're clearer in the which numbers are intended to cover what and what their sources are. Again, I don't want to dive into it. We in CTC Technologies did our own analysis for cost estimate to help try to provide some perhaps more up-to-date numbers. And your comments here are super helpful in continuing to ground truth that. And it is why we provided a range, because as you know, it's always different when you actually get on the ground rather than using models along the way.
Sure, and I also will make a point on Starlink. I've been running Starlink for 3 months. Yesterday, I bonded my Starlink to my DSL. I've got really bad DSL, and Starlink's not much greater either. But in one hour and a half governing board call, I had 200 failovers on Starlink. It's really I think it's being oversold, and I have a clear view of the northern sky. So I do appreciate the fact that you may remain mute on Starlink. I just don't. I think I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm just saying it's not ready for prime time.
Great. Thank you, Christine, for your comment. Do we have comments from anyone else? Would anyone else like to make a comment? Move to the folks on the phone now. Okie doke. Last chance, and then anyone else like to make a comment?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I have one question. On the AT&T FirstNet, how are you? couldn't figure out how ubiquitous that coverage would be when we're done. So I'm not sure whether you've got an answer to that or is that.
And we can address that comment in the plan on the ubiquitous, the coverage of FirstNet if it's not there already. So I think that Stephen has a comment. Stephen, do you want to provide a comment?
Yeah, it's more than one. I believe that the plan falls far short of the statutory requirements, the draft plan. I think it's somewhat absurd to suggest that we're going to make it optional for CUDs to choose whether they want to do open access or net neutrality. Or, I mean, these are statutory foundational documents. They're foundation principles in statute that competitive choice and open access is our state policy, is our goal, and it's the job of this plan to define a path to implement it as quickly and as ubiquitously as possible. And it's not one where you pick and choose which goals and policies you like and then make them optional. That's not what the plan. That's not what the contract requires. That's not what the statute requires. So I think the plan is vastly deficient in that regard. I'd also like to point out that the Magellan plan said that we have a competitive market for middle mile fiber, which discredited its findings. It was also based on the electric utilities becoming ISPs. And so to reference that document is in error. It's a building on sand. I concur with Christine's comments that the accuracy of our base data, which we like to brag about, is all suspect, and it says so on every one of the department's maps that we don't stand behind this data. We got it from the carriers themselves, and it's somewhat absurd to be spouting it as if it were accurate. The potential uses of the Velco network, the dense wave division multiplexers that are scattered all over the state on resilient rings, is not covered in this plan, whereas that may be the most immediate and available capacity that the CUDs could build off. And we risk making a grave error in not answering that question up front, because if we were to build on that same architecture with the same manageable equipment, we would have both resiliency capacity and central management and rerouting capability in the event of fiber breaks around another path, even if it has to go many miles around another route. That network is designed for that kind of thing. Similarly, the microwave network and its role in public safety, failover, and hurricane response or ice storm response, whether or not we should upgrade the microwave network and rely on that for backhaul for 911 calls at least, if not other stuff. The neutral host and mobile wireless chapter is really a farce. The neutral host strategy is you can't put out an RFP and ask the one vendor who was granted a huge advantage of $25 million in NTIA funds for FirstNet and an additional $30 million worth of spectrum, if not greater than that, to then put a competing proposal in or ask their main roaming partner in Vermont, VTEL, who might be a nice, an appropriate neutral host operator, to compete against AT&T in such an RFP. That's just a fundamentally flawed concept. This example, this draft plan is an example where a vendor compromises their engineering integrity to accommodate a political perspective of a dysfunctional agency. And I think it is a fraud upon the public to have charged $750,000 for the two plans combined from this team. Or the statewide fiber design is necessary. It's in the bill. It's not mentioned. It may have come too late to make it into this draft because it was part of conference committee negotiations. But a statewide resilient fiber design would accommodate all built fiber that's got public funds or ratepayer funds, which would include Velco. It would include consolidated SCAF2 funded middle mile fiber. It would include First Light from our SovereignNet investments. So a statewide design, thereby minimizing or reducing the expectations of the CUDs to have to build middle mile and long haul infrastructure. I think we're greatly exaggerating the capacity and the skill and even the available materials and management teams that it would take to turn the CUDs into fiber building contractors or management operators. So by utilizing existing experienced utilities, especially ones that already have infrastructure or that could quickly build infrastructure with existing crews and trucks, is the only way we're going to get this done. And I think that should have been fleshed out in this plan. So other people have mentioned the open access competitive choice 100 symmetric. A gaping flaw in this plan is that is not optional. The plan is required to address each of the two OTC goals and lay out a strategy to achieve those goals. This plan addresses a strategy to serve fiber eventually to everybody who doesn't already have cable. But the cabled areas where fiber does not exist are also required to have a strategy to reach and serve those areas in this plan. That's been ignored. That's a fundamental deficiency. The CUD's Universal Service Plan should include every address that's not served with fiber if we're going to reach the 100 goal by 2024. I hear talk or I see press releases that suggest that we'll do this in 10 years. I'm sorry, that wasn't an option. The statutory goal is 2024. The funding is available. You don't have the option of choosing to take 10 years when the statute says we will have fiber to every home by 2024. So I just think the fundamental premise, the arrogance of the political manipulation and compromise of this plan is ghastly. The EBS spectrum, the connectivity division has been required for 5 or 6 years to inventory all available spectrum in the state that's held by instrumentalities and analyze its best and applicable use towards deployment of broadband. That's not done in this plan, and it hasn't been done by the department in the last 5 years. The legal analysis is all suspect and flawed and compromised by hiring an attorney who is on the board, an operating board member of ValleyNet, who is a ISP and a fiber builder under contract to EC Fiber and Lime Fiber and others, but yet claims to be a nonprofit, not subject to Public Records Act, and therefore not accountable. But you can't have a legal analysis that fits the agenda of a vendor operating in this space underpinning your legal analysis in a 10-year telecommunications plan. I'm referring to Attorney Montrol there. The statute required effective public participation. I find it very disingenuous to announce that this is the second of 3 hearings when no one knew about nor showed up to the first hearing. You can't really call it a hearing. So this is not the second of 3 hearings. This is the first hearing that anyone was notified about, and many were notified by my actions, not yours. So the estimates of cell phone coverage, 91.9% on Class 1 roads, is farcical and inaccurate to a laughable degree. There's no realistic analysis of finding of the role of deploying interim fixed wireless as a strategy to provide broadband service above 25.3 until fiber can reach these customers, and its potential benefit of also deploying mobile broadband simultaneously. That is one of the most economical strategies we could pursue, and that and a neutral host model, having all carriers share the cost of that infrastructure and support the fixed wireless being deployed and even owned by the CUDs. And yet that is entirely missing. The earlier interim plan that cost $475,000 poo-pooed the idea of using fixed wireless by saying it takes too long to site towers, as if no one in the department or the contractors had been aware that a waiver on tower building permits had been passed in the prior legislation. I find that a ghastly oversight that undermines the credibility of this whole product and process. Anyway, I believe this plan is so deficient it cannot be adopted. Its main role is to establish and guide policy decisions by CUDs and by agencies, and especially the Public Utilities Commission, in evaluating the incentive rate plan next summer. This plan needs to be built upon, improved upon, and finished, which it is far from now. It cannot be adopted as is in 3 years lapse, and let another compromised incentive reg plan be adopted. It's the strategy by which we could potentially gain access to consolidated middle mile fiber, which we'll need to do to accomplish this build in this amount of years with this amount of money. And being that a lot of that CAF2 funded infrastructure was public money, it's perfectly logical that we would seek to not only access that fiber, but allow Consolidated to roam on other state-built fibers in the interest of supporting competitive choice. We can't just selectively throw inconvenient or fearful impacts of competitive choice away because the CUDs would rather have a monopoly, when the statute says the department and the plan is to support competitive choice. End of sentence. So I think that we've compromised this entire process, and I had great hopes when I succeeded in getting the legislature to allow a private contractor to do it, but the department has compromised this contractor and further compromised their own integrity in this product. I'll leave it at that for right now.
Clay, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Matt. Jonathan, please take it away.
Oh no, I was just saying, is there anyone else that wants to comment? I don't want to hog the mic.
Okay, great.
I mean, if there's no one else, I do have another comment.
All right, yeah, if you want to make it quick, and then we can invite you to the next hearing.
I did something that Mr. Whitaker touched on. Kind of is something that I did miss in the plan, which is a mechanism for holding the organizations accountable to their quote unquote plan to reach all premises, which maybe is beyond the scope of this document. I'm not sure, but that's sort of like a core principle, is reaching unserved and underserved addresses. And it's very easy to have a plan and like present that in order to get money. You know what I mean? But I'm hoping there's going to be some very specific spelled out way of holding organizations accountable to those plans, so that they don't do, what the incumbents have always done, which is build out dense centers and leave the urban areas, in the dust, so to speak.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for coming and for your valuable comments. We have recorded this session, so we'll be able to take your comments under consideration, and we will address them in the plan. Just a reminder, we have another hearing June 1st at 6 p.m. and the information on accessing that hearing is on our website. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Mm.